get the feeling this could actually be a longer episode than normal, just thanks to the fact that I took a few weeks off. Whether I took that time off intentionally or not, I think anybody in Southern Ontario, Canada, North America, right now your daughter is likely just wrapped up the regular season, possibly just wrapping up playoffs and getting ready. In Ontario, we're getting ready for provincials. That's the next big thing that's coming up. And I do want to say a little something about that, so I'll get to that in a second. But I'm starting off this episode with a quick story about an email I got, which to say I was shocked to get this email is not saying enough words. I'm going to say your name, and I hope it's not a problem, no last names. But I received an email from Marianne. She reached out. Her and her family moved to Virginia from France. And she just gave a quick note saying that when they moved to North America, they expected to be in sort of the land of hockey. And they were, I think, shocked to experience just the expense alone in minor hockey for our kids. The whole supply and demand thing, you would think that because we are such a hockey-focused nation, the U.S. and Canada, that it would inherently make the sport more affordable, but we all know that that's not the case. So I just wanted to quickly shout you out, Marianne. Thank you so much for your kind words, and I wish your daughters all the best, and your husband in coaching their teams. I hope they had a great season, and I hope they have a fantastic season next year. I don't think any of that is too sappy, but any email I get still and message on Instagram or anything else still kind of blows me away. So I don't even understand how people like Noxie and Cax or Jocks and Jills or any of those podcasts that I am sure are inundated with emails and messages. I don't even know how they manage it. It just seems crazy to me. I wanted to touch on really quickly all the amazing things happening in the PWHL right now. So far in the last month, we've had the Scotiabank Arena game between Toronto and Montreal sold out. I was there. It was incredible. This past weekend, we had Little Caesars Arena in Detroit and the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh, and I know those were both great turnouts. Just phenomenal to see how well the league is doing right now, and only going to grow more and more and more. I hope so much that all of the playoff games for Toronto can be played at the Scotiabank Arena. That would be awesome, because then tickets would be available, hypothetically. Although I thought that too with Toronto and Montreal playing a regular season game, and no, fully sold out. Everybody is aware, as of today, that Ontario Provincials are being held the weekend of April 11th, or between April 11th and April 14th. So I know for a fact anybody who is out of playoffs right now, or just wrapping up playoffs, we're all in preparation mode for the provincials. So quick shout out to all of you teams out there that are going to be competing in the GTA for the Ontario Provincials, and wishing you all the best of luck. I will be there. If you happen to see me, not that any of you or many of you would really recognize me to see me, make sure you say hey. At some point in the future, I don't know why I would do this, but I may make some merch. We'll see about that. I think it would be hilarious to see people walking around wearing Girl Hockey Dad podcast hats or shirts or whatever. So we'll see about that. Coming up in future episodes, I've been getting some emails from the U.S., from some coaches that might want to get on and talk about the differences between the ACHA and NCAA when it comes to post-secondary. To that effect, I would also like to get some people in to talk about OUA sports and how North America works, obviously. Just a quick thought on that. So if anybody listening happens to be absolutely weathered when it comes to the OUA, please don't hesitate to reach out by email, and we'll set something up. So I do want to get to this week's topic, which, as I put out on a poll on Instagram, we're going to talk about tryouts. It's that time of year, depending on what age you are, and we all have feelings about this. So let's jump into it and see what the aftermath of discussing tryouts is. Okay, let's do it. Grab your cup of coffee, grab your cup of tea, your glass of scotch, your glass of wine, your beer in hand, whatever your coping mechanism is at this time of year, the dreaded tryouts. If you're just new to rep hockey and you're about to get into your first round of tryouts, don't worry, it'll all be over soon. This is an incredibly stressful time of year. I've always thought that the reason it's so stressful is that you're essentially waiting for somebody else to judge your kid and say whether or not they're good enough to play on a team. And as we all know, we all think our kid is the best one out there. Sometimes we're a little bit too honest in this house, I know. To a fault, I'm sure. Before we get too far into anything, I want to touch on the fact that no matter what age your player is, U9 all the way up to U22, there is a spot for every kid to land. And through this episode, I'm sure I'm going to be talking to myself just as much as I'm talking to anybody who's listening. But the reality is your child or daughter is going to land at the right place. So if you're shooting for tier 1 and you feel like you're on the bubble and that player isn't going to make it to tier 1, or they end up not making it to tier 1, that is not the end of the world. I've had so many conversations with so many players that are now playing professionally or coaching at a high level that, played single A, double B at some point during their career, played single A, then double A, then maybe dropped down a level, and then wound up going back up and still played NCAA or OUA and have made a real career out of hockey. First things first, all the U9ers, nothing that happens in the next 3 weeks is going to determine your hockey career. Nothing that happens in the next 3 years is going to determine your hockey career. You go at your own pace. Everybody's got to grow at their own pace. Everybody's got to be given the space to become the player and the person that they're supposed to be. So my rant and my preach is over. I want to get into some fun stuff here, and then I want to talk a little bit about what my conversations have been around tryouts, and just knowing that we have some people listening that maybe are experiencing the OWHA for the first time or North American hockey for the first time. I'm going to have a little bit of a rant about that. So first things first, I have to tell a personal story. I'm going to make sure I put a link up for this so that everybody can actually read what the OWHA says about these things, but we are coming up on the very start of the tryout season. This means for the previous, month, 2 months, 3 months, depending on where you're playing, you have been watching how everyone else is doing. You've been watching everybody else's kid. You've been paying attention to conversations and hearing rumors and hearing who's possibly going here and who's possibly going there. And you're listening to all of this and you're weighing it against what you see on your own team and what your kid's doing and what this kid's doing. And chances are your sleep and your eating habits have been affected for the past 3 months. And I'm sorry for that. I'm one of them, just so you know. So I want to go back and tell a story about a time when I don't even remember how old they were. I'm not going to use names or any of that, but I remember being in conversations, watching tryouts, and having the very start of tryouts happen. So everybody gets their number, and they don't use names as you're going through the rosters to see who made the last cut, who's making it to the next round. So you're counting numbers, you're looking at penny numbers during the sessions, and you're trying to keep track of who's who and how they rate and how they rank, so you know whether your kid's still got a chance or maybe a friend's kid, how they're doing, how everybody's landing, and how you feel. So because at the end of every session, you go home and you talk about it with your significant other, you chat through and you see who looked good, who didn't, and whatever else. So this is the start of the chaos. So I remember this year specifically where I was watching tryouts and I was thinking, oh my goodness, my daughter had been doing so well that season. She'd be training hard, and tryouts start, and I think, man, she's looking so good out there. And my wife's asking me, how does she look? How's she doing? And I'm saying, oh my gosh, like she's easily in the top 3 of the D corps, and she's going to be just fine in all of this. And cuts start happening, and she's making it through, and we're sort of waiting for that offer call and thinking it's going to work out. And we do get the call finally, and we answer the phone, or I answer the phone, and I'm like, here we go. And she's been released. And I was beside myself. Anybody who's experienced this, you know that when you stand back and look at it, you feel like it's not just about that moment. It's not just about your kid. It's like you've been attacked. It's like you stop and think about yourself. Think, oh, do I not understand this? Am I not paying attention? Am I wearing rose-colored glasses when I watch my kid play? Like, what's wrong with me? So she got cut. So she didn't make the top team, and some things ensued, and blah blah blah. Life goes on. So I'm years removed from that now, and that was our first daughter going through the process. So bring on the second kid going through the process, and it does help that you've already gone through it, and you can stand back and say, okay, I know this might not go how I think it's going to, but I also know at the end of the day, don't freak out. It's just a process. We're all going to be okay. So there's no reason to be overly stressed. And guess what? It doesn't make a difference. You're still going to stress out. So I think that's the funny part, is even though we've gone through it now, I can still look and objectively think, okay, this is how the process goes. Some players are going to make it. Some players are going to be released. And yet still, I spend way too much time thinking about this. It is what it is. That's the time of year that we're in. I tell that story just to say to all the newcomers and the seasoned vets and everybody else that this whole topic, this whole conversation is coming from somebody who has lived it. And I'm not even saying that I have some sort of moral compass on the subject because I've had a kid go through the process of being released, and so I understand and I can more appropriately discuss the topic. I don't think that's fair because there are players who have gone through their entire playing career playing top tier. They're gifted hockey players, and it's very easy to look at them and say, oh my gosh, those families have no idea how stressful it is at this time of year. They have no idea what we're going through, what the feelings are, and all these discussions we have to have, and blah, 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 on and on and on and on. Because I'll bet you they've had all the same conversations, and maybe they feel like the center they're playing in isn't strong enough, and maybe they would like to go somewhere else. And everybody's situation is different. You have no idea. So even that kid who has just been top tier their entire life, that parent group, or those parents, the discussions they've had, I'm sure they might look different, but I don't know how different they actually look. I don't believe that I'm a moral guideline. I don't believe that I have all the answers. I would never say I have all the answers, but I have definitely lived this world. In Ontario, every association is going to have a slightly different approach to the tryout process. So what I didn't want to do in this episode is I didn't want to drill down how Sudbury runs theirs and Ottawa runs theirs and whatever. I don't want to get into the specifics of how every center does what they do. But what I sort of wanted to touch on was the emotion of this time of year and a few things that seem to come up on repeat that is not specific to any center, but is, I think, global when it comes to girls hockey and probably hockey in general, youth hockey in general. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is this discussion around, I would say, December, January, when coaches start looking at what they need player-wise for the following season. Those coaches are already looking at the level below. So say your Tier 1 coach, your AA coach is now paying attention to who's existing in the Single A. Could anyone from the Single A team come up and play AA for their major year? They're looking at the level below to see who's there, who's ready to come up. They've probably been having players out as APs either for games or just for practices and to see how they can handle the next age level and see how ready they seem. They have, obviously, a responsibility to build a team year over year, depending on, is your center doing 2 years for the coaches or whatever. So there's some reality that there's been some scouting and some watching and some conversating already. If you're on a few years, so say you're U13, U15, any parents that are new to rep hockey, something that may blow your mind, it's going to feel weird, but there have already been parents reaching out to your coach and having conversations about possibly leaving their center, etc. And that brings me probably to the first point about the word that I see all the time that comes up during tryouts is this word tampering. Let's have a real discussion or a real conversation about tampering. That word, if you go to the OWHA website, tampering exists or happens when a coach reaches out to a player in another center and requests them to come play. And I can say this with zero facts to back it or anything else. This is one of those I feel it, therefore it's true statements. 99+% of the time is not a coach reaching out to a player. It is a parent reaching out to a coach in another center saying, hey, we're considering leaving. Is there any chance you can come watch my child play, practice, whatever, and see if they're the type of player that you would like for your team next season? If you happen to see a coach around your rink at this time of year or, between January and now, wearing another center's hat that is not playing, your daughter's playing another team from another center, and there's a coach standing around the glass with a clipboard or an iPad or whatever else, and they're not coaching one of these teams, chances are that they're watching a player that they've been asked to come watch. So it's a crazy word to throw around at this time of year. Just whenever I hear it, I think it's funny because there's this assumption that coaches are out there stalking other players in Ontario. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm sure it does. It probably happens. So I'm not writing it off entirely, but for experienced, for future parents coming into the minor hockey system in Ontario and Canada and North America, chances are, if you're seeing this happen, a parent has reached out. That's a great segue into you have a player playing in a center and you're looking at the numbers, you're looking at maybe even the team for the next year, and you're not feeling super confident, or you know what, maybe even more simplistically, your daughter has a friend in a center close by and you're thinking, oh man, it would be nice if they could play together. Is it weird for you to reach out to that center? No, not at all. It's super common for a parent to reach out to a coach and say, hey, what's it looking like next year? Do you have any feelings about bringing some imports in? Do you already have all your numbers made up or whatever? So that's not a weird thing. Don't, as a parent, feel like it's strange to reach out to another coach. If anything, it's expected. And if you're thinking these other kids are just getting moved around centers because they've been spotted, chances are it's not that way. They've reached out. There's this underlying conversation that is a much, much bigger conversation, and we're not going to get into it too much right now, and that's going to be around, moving centers and why and all of those things. So let's not touch on that too much right now. Let's just stay focused on tryouts and see if we can get through this thing. We'll move from tampering on to this next conversation, which is player movement. In the situation of player movement, you may be shocked to see kids leaving your center, going to another center, and trying to figure that whole thing out. There are so many different things at play here. We all know that there's what the parents want and then what the kids want, and there's maybe the kids aren't advocating well enough for themselves or whatever. There's thousands of reasons why people leave centers. So I don't want to make any assumptions, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I don't want any of that to happen here. So all I'm going to leave it at is there's a ton of different reasons why people change centers, why they try something new, why they do what they do. And I don't think it's for any of us to judge why. So we'll leave it at that. In girls hockey, movement happens. I know in boys hockey, there's a lot more regulation on your center and where you start at AAA and make your way down, and there's different ways you can move or reasons why you can't. So we're not really dealing with that yet, and I would not be shocked if in the next couple of years we see more of that come in to girls hockey, and that'll maybe come up in a few minutes here. But as of this moment in time, no, we do not have regulations around who can move where. I can guarantee with the introduction of the pro leagues, and as more money funnels in and more sponsorships come in, we're going to start to see more of a replication of the boys system. There's going to be more people trying to move to the next level and more people trying to be in the right place at the right time. And what does that mean? And how do I move here? And how do I get my kids seen and this and that? So I can imagine that in the next few years, centers or associations will start to implement some, movement clauses or restrictions or whatever to try and keep talent local. And if talent does want to move, there's going to have to be some justification and there's going to have to be a process. That doesn't exist right now, so don't stress about it. I'll go back and talk just for a second about the reaching out to coaches thing, because I've been a coach. I have not, again, been a head coach at the Tier 1 level, so I've been adjacent to it. I've helped out through the process. I've been on bench for some exhibition games during tryouts. Basically, I'll say this. So as you reach out to a coach and you say, you know, we're considering moving, that coach may engage in a conversation or they may not. It is what it is. I mean, it's you can look at it from is it a good policy for a coach to reach out to you if you've requested? Absolutely. But there's also some other things at play here. A coach may not be staying on for the following season, or they may be in a situation where they've already selected a chunk of their team and they aren't really engaging in any imports or any additional player requests prior to tryout dates. And that may all be a nice segue into the conversation about internal skates and permissions to skate and PTTs. PTSs and PTTs, if you haven't heard, is permission to try out or permission to skate. So if your daughter plays for center X and they want to try out at center Y, then they need to request a permission to skate from center X in order to do that. There is a harsh reality here, depending on where you play, that there are centers that instead of providing a permission to skate, will just provide a release to that player. And talk about another hot topic item. This is a big thing. So if you're playing as a local player at Association X and you say, I would like a PTS tryout at Association Y, and your center says, you know what? Here's a release. You can just go. And actually, we don't want you here anymore. That's a harsh statement, but you should be aware. You should have the conversation with your center if that's their mandate, if that's how they handle things. I'm not going to get into whether that's right or wrong. I can see instances where it does make sense, and I can really feel parents that think that's the worst thing in the world. Actually, forget it. I am going to get into it for a second here. And the funny thing is, centers that want to implement that release versus permission to try out or permission to skate, it's kind of funny. It's almost like you're not looking out, you're only looking in, because every other center is doing the same thing. There are kids trying to find a place to play, and inside of the OWHA, inside of girls hockey, like I said, we don't have any kind of regulations to stop players from moving. So if you're looking at imports for your team for the next year, okay, that's great. That's something you've identified, especially at the tier 1 level. And I should say that this, when I'm talking about imports or I'm talking about this specific situation about being released, I would say that it largely speaks to tier 1 players. So if you're an association that is looking to bring in players, you're looking to have imports, that means you need to accept that your own players may be looking to play elsewhere also. So if you're a player in this association, you don't feel like there's a spot for you, or you may even just say that you're looking for a change or wanting to see if there's another place for you, why don't we allow people to try out? For sure, there's lots of reasons why a center might not be super interested in having their players try out in other places, and rarely it's about that. It almost feels like a punishment. If you're going to try out somewhere else, we'll just release you. You can carry on and do whatever you want. Again, I'm not getting into whether that's right or wrong. It's just something that's out there. Treating this almost like a small information session and then moving into almost some feelings or some thoughts about the tryout time and process and all those things is kind of where we're going here. So one of the last things I want to get into about the tryouts is, now we've talked about sort of other centers scouting players. We've talked about your coach building the team for the next year. Now we've talked about the dreaded T word, tampering, and we've gotten into permission to skates, etc. So now we're into the actual tryout process. Again, each center is going to treat this a little bit differently. The younger age groups, they're going to have a bunch of skills sessions, and they're going to have evaluators checking out your kid and seeing how they perform these skills, and they're trying to identify maybe who's stronger and who's weaker, maybe U9, U11. I'm guessing at this point, U11, they're getting more into playing games. They're doing much more in the way of scrimmage than they are of skills, because let's be honest, you might show very well in the skill aspect, but it comes down to gameplay. Can you actually play the game? I think a lot of coaches these days would prefer a hockey player over, like a specific skill player who doesn't necessarily bring the hockey sense. It's definitely gotten heavier in even the younger age groups, that a player who reads the game or sees hockey versus just a specific skill is probably going to be better for your association long term. Again, broad spectrum statement. It doesn't really mean anything. So at this point, we're having a conversation with folks that have just started the process. There's probably people that are 5 cycles through tryouts that still actually don't really know what happens in the background, and they don't really know the process of October to April or October to March, and how conversations start and how early conversations start. Like I actually can't believe how many parents I've talked to that are still a little bit shocked at how much movement and conversation happens prior to the physical tryouts starting. Now we're getting to the point where your daughter's, she's, started the first, maybe even gotten through the first couple cuts, and you're waiting for that, are we trying for the second team or for the third team or whatever. And maybe that's where we can leave the technical side of tryouts. I'm going to say my piece. I was told by a friend who listened to a couple episodes who said, stop apologizing. This is, you're taking your time to do this, so you may as well say what you think. So I guess I'm going to say what I think, and we'll see how it goes. My thought process is this. The OWHA doesn't really set specific parameters on this tryout process. It feels like there's a lot of guidelines, and it feels like if you go to any association in Ontario, if you go to any of their websites, there's likely a document that you can read that are bylaws adopted by the association as to how they handle conflicts, suspensions, any of the different situations that come up. It'll talk about how they handle tryouts and tournaments and call-ups and all of these different things. In reviewing some of these documents and these bylaws, it's just sort of written. And if you happen to find them, that's great. But even if you want to call it into question, what are you really going to do about it? How are we going to actually have a conversation about this when every center is going to handle what I'm about to say differently? And that's the evaluation process. I'm sure a bunch of people, the hair just stood up on the back of their necks or their arms or whatever, and they can just, you have that visceral response to, I know for a fact that this team is selected already, and the coach maybe left 2 spots to be filled, and it's his buddies that are the quote-unquote evaluators, the third-party evaluators or independent evaluators that are watching the kids, and they have no bias, blah, blah, blah. And then you'll say that coach then goes back to those evaluators and says, hey, who do you have as 1, 2, and 3? And the reality is, unless somebody's willing to put their hand up and show me differently, I don't believe that there is a set process for this. I don't believe there's any accountability. There likely is no accountability, and that may be in boys, that may be in girls, that may be across the spectrum. So from U9 all the way through to probably U15, U18, you're likely going to have a team built mostly by the head coach, assistant coach, friends of the assistant or head coach. It's going to be selected based on how they feel about what they want and what the conversations have been about the type of play, type of game, etc. This is where, as a parent, you can start to feel like, oh man, it doesn't matter how good my kid is, as long as this, nepotism, or as long as the friendship group or this or that exists, it's not going to make any difference. My kid's not going to make it because we're not on the inside. Okay, that sucks, and is probably true. I don't know how else to say it. I feel like I've been a part of this exact same conversation, this exact same scenario where you feel like, my kid's good enough to be there, but there's no chance. They don't have a chance because we're not on the inside. And sometimes you find out that even if you are on the inside, it doesn't make a difference. Again, I think I'm coming at this whole topic from being on both sides of the spectrum. One of the craziest things I think I've ever heard is having parents from other teams or other centers come up and tell me that not even that they heard, but like, oh, you're going to be the assistant coach on this team next year. And I'm thinking, well, that's news to me. The rumor mill at tryout time is insane, and it can likely cause you more stress than any other process. Your kids more stress, you more stress, the coach more stress, because people have no idea. Unless your kid has been told by the coach and that coach has made it public, or your kid has talked to another friend and said, hey, by the way, I was early signed, or this or that, the other thing, chances are nobody has any idea what's happening. There is a strong rumor or strong suspected feeling that most teams south of the 401 in Ontario have their AA teams built by about now, which is, the end of March or early April, and they leave a couple of spots, if any, available for tryouts. There are a handful of teams that likely aren't going to be doing any selecting during the tryout process, and they have had their team built, and it's all over. It's mostly for show, or they're having kids come out that maybe could make the second team. Right or wrong, that's just the way it is. And I think that's something that needs to be said out loud is, again, another thing I've heard from parents that say, I cannot believe how many of these teams are just already built by the time you get to tryouts. Is that wrong? Is that bad? I don't know. It's not my position to say. And I think if we were all honest, I think we would hope that everything came down to tryouts. That every year you have a team, and then at the end of the season, because we have this 2-year system in girls hockey where we don't have every birth year, I think there's a justified argument to say that the majors on some of those teams get signed for the next season and they just make their way through. But you would like to think tryouts actually do make a team. I think that would be the most reasonable way to say we hope every team is built. Okay, let's get past that and say that's not necessarily how it works. The second thing we would say we hope is that there's an actual development stream for every single team, that the B team feeds the AA team. The B team feeds the A team, feeds the AA team, etc. And in an association that's working well, you would like to think that from U9 all the way through to U18, there is a development stream, some sort of plan for the kids' development. We all know that in hockey there's going to be players that are just playing for fun. There's players that really love the game and are wanting to get better and develop, and that's where their passion is. And then we know that there's players that will rise above and go on and do great things with their sport and play collegiate and do all of those things. It's not just one type of player, it's the whole stream. So you need to have a good house league system. You need to have a good B, A, AA, and then hopefully even a junior team that you can feed from that U18 and U22 program. Not every center has that. Again, that's another topic for maybe another time when we start talking about which teams have junior teams and how they feed OUA and NCAA and all those things. At the end of the day, you would hope that in tryouts, you are trying to make a team that best suits your skill level, that will push you to the next level, to the next team, and on and on and on and on. And you would hope that whatever team that your daughter makes is going to be, they would have a good rapport with the coach and their teammates, and they would enjoy it. And at the end of the day, it's miles per hour, not miles per hour. We all know that. Or maybe we think we know that, and we lose sight of it around this time of year. That's where we're at in this whole process. There are no specific guidelines that absolutely everybody follows so that the playing field is level the whole way across. That's just not how it is. That's not hockey. That's not anything. You have these variations. It's better to understand that there's variations and that you just have to have your expectations in the right place. You aren't the one making the team. You aren't the one that's going to be playing. It's your daughter. So look at the thing as a whole. We all have to look at it as, does the association do a good job? Is my child having fun? Does the coach have a good development stream? That's become my question, is what's your plan for the team? And even if I'm having a conversation with a coach in another center that isn't my own, to say, how do you want to see your team develop next year? What are your expectations? How many games do you think you want to try and win? These are all the important things when it comes to tryouts, is where is your kid going to spend the next season playing hockey, and possibly seasons and seasons and seasons after that. That's far more important than the little nitty gritty things that we all stress about, I think. It's tryouts. Everybody's stressed out. I think the best thing for everybody at this point is to make sure that your child knows what the schedule is, when they're due to be at an internal skate or a inter-squad game or an exhibition game with another team, where you could actually have a coach from another center that's going to be there that you may even be thinking about playing in, that you could get a hold of and say, listen, we're nervous about getting a PTS, but we're going to be playing a game against you, so please keep an eye on my kid, or have somebody keep an eye on my kid and see if she's somebody that would fit in your roster. I can literally hear coaches that I'm friends with right now being like, stop telling people that. Tell everybody just to chill out and play where they play and stay the course, and things will all work out in the end. Well, again, everybody's got their own mind and their own feelings, and they're going to do what they're going to do. I can't tell anybody to do anything. The only thing I can say is take a breath. I'm talking to myself. Just take a breath. We're all going through this process. Your daughter is the one going through it, and how much are we talking to our kids about how they feel about this and where their heads are at and what do they actually care about doing? I actually had a coach say this to me maybe 2 weeks ago, and it was great. He said, if parents ask their kids more about what they actually want, I'm sure we would have a different direction through the development process. And I think that's probably true. If your kid's trying to make tier 1, double A, and it looks like they may be a bubble and they're going to play single A, the natural reaction is to look at every other center that has a possible opening at double A and just be like, my kid has to play top tier hockey. Well, maybe they are a bubble, and maybe you can have a conversation with that coach and say, I agree, or please tell my daughter what it is that you see that she needs to work on so that come next season, if she plays on that tier 2 team, she can really develop and hone her skills and get ready for the season after. Hopefully they'll call her up. That's a process. It's a long journey. Again, going back to the great conversation I had with both Katie Mora and Rachel Flanagan. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You don't get to university any sooner. You don't get to pro any sooner. I mean, there's a few absolute superstars out there, but few and far between. So are we enjoying the process as much as we are watching the games and all of those other things that we love and all the relationships and all that? I don't know. That's just as much a part of tryouts. And so I don't know if we've covered anything even important in all of this other than to say I've been here for a few years. I've had these conversations. Everybody knows the goalie parents because they stopped talking to everybody about 3 weeks ago. Spoken as a true goalie parent myself. Good luck to everybody during the tryout process. I wish all of your daughters the best. I wish all of your associations the best. Unless we're playing against you, then I wish you the second best. Everybody have a blast, please. Oh my gosh, thank you for bearing with me during the rant on a hot button topic on a stressful time of year. I feel like I could have rambled on for ages longer about that, but one more time just to reiterate to absolutely everybody out there, have a great provincials. Good luck to all of the teams out there. Good luck to everybody in the States, whatever they've got going on right now. A bunch of girls are now shifting into the lacrosse mode also, so I hear. So to anybody who's a multi-sport athlete, I wish you the best of trying to keep all your schedules in line. And to the parents, stay sane, stay safe. Everybody's going to make their way through this at the end of the day. We're all going to come out the other side. It is what it is. They'll land where they land, and we'll move on to another week. Until next time, I'll see you around the rink.